All right, you guys, we have a very loaded podcast. We are starting the New Year's with a huge bang and with a huge question. Is the UPA already out of money? We're also going to take you through how we did in our 2024 picks for players to watch.
That's right. And of course, unpacking all of the craziness of paddles and the new certifications.
Wow. Kristin takes you through the top 7 lessons she has learned in pickleball from me in 2024. I promise you there is something for you to learn in these 7 lessons.
You guys, it's Pod 55. Are
We're
you ready to
jive?
You tune in now to this pickleball life. I'm Kdubby and Jilly B is my wife. She's the pro and I've got the filler. She's sweet to me, but on the court she's a killer. Unadulterated and efficiently bringing you the best and worst things in PB. Tell your friends and stay for another. And no one loves us more than your mother. One thing's for sure, when hit and you're addicted. Grab a pile, grab a court, don't resist it. So click subscribe, let's go, let's get cracking. Things on gun, let's go, let's get laughing. This pickleball life.
You guys, I have released my 2025 teaching calendar, and I am so excited to announce fantasy camps in Newport Beach, starting with a ladies only March 6th through the 7th. We have a pickleball breakdown camp with my coach and MLP Coach of the Year, Scott Crandall, mid-February in Pasadena, California. And
all
of course,
this information, of course, on jillybpickleball.com or jillianbraverman.com/camps.
You guys, if you're listening to this podcast, it means you want to be a better pickleball player. I know it does. And if that's the case, what are you doing? You need to take one of these camps. You know what? Doesn't even have to be with me, but take a camp, go see a trusted instructor in your local area, or travel. Come to Mexico. We're going back to Trace October 25th. It is a magical experience. It's super safe. We have females who travel there alone.
One of the toughest things in finding good camps is not only the instruction, but the opponents. And we have such a high concentration
high-level players.
4 or 5 players that is just hard to guarantee at most camps. And we are very blessed and lucky to have such high-level participants in our camps. And that's a big part of why people get excited to keep coming back to especially Tres Palapas.
Kristin is totally right. We have such a high concentration of 4.0, 4.5, and above campers, and that number is only increasing. If you're serious about getting better in your pickleball game, give yourself the gift. Come see myself and Kristin in 2025.
It is literally the gift that keeps on giving.
This is the second time we've had to film this podcast. That's right. We were going to deliver a Christmas present direct to your telephone, and we had to refilm because new information came out, and we are nothing if not semi-thorough.
So our Christmas pod became a New Year's pod.
You're welcome.
Let's hit it off 2025
with a
bang. Pod 55, 2025. It seems meant to be.
Absolutely. So, Kristin, we have been waiting to report on this story for what feels like months. And it wasn't until a couple things happened during Christmas week, concurrently from the UPA, that led me to finally say it's time to do this pod. It's time to reveal the truth. Is the UPA a total house of cards? Because we now know they're going into 2025 with almost no money in their bank. You heard me
So Jill,
correctly.
tell us, how do we know that?
Well, they are in need of an emergency $10 million bridge loan, and they need this by January 15th.
So for those of us who didn't go to business school, a bridge loan is
So they have
basically to get you
short-term-
from point A to point B.
Yeah, exactly. So if you were to ask
Like you couldn't go to a
them-
bank and get this. You're going to have to ask someone you know, someone inside of your investor group.
If you were going to ask the UPA, why do you need this? They'd say, well, we have front-loaded salary player contracts to pay in Q1. We have a lot of debt on our books that's coming due Q1. So we need this bridge loan. But hey, don't worry, because we're going to be solvent the rest of the year. And we're going to talk more about that later. But right now, entering 2025 with little to no cash from the, quote, $75 million merger less than 10 months ago that they have burned through. I say air quotes for the 75 million, you guys, because we know it's actually a different lower number, which is interesting. And we're going to talk about that later. So the two kind of harbingers or canaries in the coal mine, Kristin, that happened during Christmas week. P.S. PPA has a really interesting tradition
It's that time
of celebrating
year.
Christmas. And that is maximum coercion, maximum pressure, and maximum deadlines. Last year was on the players, this year on the paddle companies. What a strange tradition.
This is something to do with them, like doing their taxes, their last minute accounting. They're like, oh, wait, January's coming.
I don't want to be in any of those executives' households during Christmas.
Seriously.
So the two things that were the harbingers, one, the UPA asking their biggest supporters and sponsors, paddle companies, essentially for $100,000 each to continue being a paddle played on the PPA and MLP tours. So that's half for certification, Kristin, and then half for like a marketing and licensing fee, which is essentially, hey, we're paying for broadcast dollars and your logo's on your player's paddle. Pay us.
Yeah. And now, just to be clear, the 50 of marketing is a flat rate, but the paddle certification depends a little bit on how many paddles you have.
That's why I'm averaging 50.
If you assume that most companies have 5 to 10 paddles at least,
yeah, it could be more than 50.
That they each need to get certified, that gets you to that 100 number.
Yeah, so
which is a little bit funny considering when they first threw that number out last summer, it was like, no, it's not going to be anything close to that. And it'll be like
it was more
70.
Yeah.
And now here we are, and it's literally that
so
number.
that was one thing, right? That kind of piqued my little antennae. And then the second was this extraordinarily over-the-top, rosy letter titled PPA and MLP have their best year ever in 2024, which I found incredibly insulting to all of our intelligence. And so did a bunch of other Facebook comments that we're going to read.
So to be clear, of course they had their best year yet. The sport is growing rapidly. It's the fastest growing sport. That part is not shocking, but we're going to get into the details of the way in which they choose to use numbers selectively, being the insult to our intelligence.
So Kristin, read us some excerpts from this letter, and then we're going to talk a little bit more later about the paddle manufacturer issues going on, and then also the financial crunch.
So the first stat they use is, in 2024, more than 320,000 fans attended PPA Tour and MLP events, up 40% from 2023, marking the first year in which revenue from ticket sales surpassed revenue from amateur registration.
All right, Kristin, read between the lines for me here. This is interesting.
So yeah, you had me until the caveat. Like, why
bring up amateur
mention that
registration?
you surpassed amateur registration without mentioning amateur registration? Does that mean your amateur registration maybe went down?
Yeah, and I think this is really easy math that, like I said earlier, we're being semi-thorough. We could have gone and go to Pickleball Brackets, look up, let's say, like Masters registration from the year prior to this year, go tally up the number of participants in the amateur events. I know that when I used to play PPA events, you couldn't get a practice court. Now it's super easy to get a practice court. So again, show us the amateur registration numbers before just saying, oh, spectator sales have surpassed.
Right. The number 2 is the PPA Mesa Arizona Cup Fox National broadcast saw 501,000 viewers tune in, the largest ever pro pickleball TV audience. The exciting matches outdrew other notable sporting events in the U.S., including the MLS Cup broadcast on Fox in December.
All right, Kristin,
So,
walk us through the
first of all,
caveats here.
I think that what has commonly been known as the largest audience ever was in China, like a year and a half ago. So I don't know what happened with that or how they're delineating the difference in that, but what stuck out on that one for you?
Oh, for me, I mean, the UPA or the PPA has been circumspect at best when delivering broadcast numbers. So I had their sponsors come to me a year ago and say, look, I put together this entire deck and here's every single event, the numbers that they reported on viewership and how I was able to determine using these three websites that they were totally way off. Jill, here's what they're doing. They take total digital impressions. So if there was a short that went viral that had 3 million views, they just go ahead and they throw it in there with the broadcast numbers. Jill, isn't this insane? Like we gotta tell people about this. So again, this wasn't something that I personally researched. It's just something that I have heard over and over and over again. So when I see that the major bullet they're providing is the PPA Mesa Arizona Cup from 11 months ago, and that's still the biggest, and then there's no other broadcast numbers. That was something an MLP team owner reported to me last week because they're being asked to put up money for this bridge loan. And this team owner said to me, I don't even get broadcast numbers.
Right.
I don't even have
And we
viewership.
know
I have no viewership
when
numbers.
you see pickleball on Fox, ESPN, CBS Sports Network, those are pickleball entities paying the cable company to have that airtime, not the other way around. So for this sport truly to get to even, I think, WNBA level is to get that reversed, where the networks are actually paying
that's the goal,
entity
right?
for that time. So to say your best day was the slot you paid for is also in and of itself kind of misleading.
Well said.
At best. So number 3 is the roughly 130 pro pickleball players under contract with MLP and the PPA Tour earn more than $30 million collectively over the course of a season, more than many other professional leagues, including the WNBA, Premier Lacrosse League, and NBA G League. Also, what is the NBA G League?
I don't know, but a lot of
Is that Europe?
a lot struck me about this. First off, I think they're talking about salaries, even though they don't specify that here, because obviously Caitlin Clark with her endorsements is earning a lot more than.
Right. So it's exactly opposite for the WNBA. They have very low caps, like 1.2 million for the whole team on salaries. So Caitlin Clark makes like 80 grand a year, which I thought was like unbelievable, but apparently that's the case. So to me, that's like, okay, you're going to compare your inflated numbers to another league's problem.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that's somewhat fact, but still, as you said, Caitlin Clark is making about $3.5 million a year when you include all her endorsements.
So I don't need to really opine on this because a bunch of people on Facebook did so for me. So one person wrote in regards to how high the female salaries are. I think they said did they give an average? They said the average
was
260. They said the average female on the PPA and MLP tours is making $260,000 a year. So one user wrote, remove the top 3 females from this and give us the real average. Another user wrote, tell us the median here. So I kind of agree, right? Like it is a little deceptive in that one sentence of if you're a female on the PPA, this is what you're earning.
Let's just see a table. Like I looked this up for the NBA once.
And it said ranking and
where
salary.
we compared, and it was like the 100th guy in the world makes $10 million or something.
Yeah, show it.
Don't quote me on that one. But point being, like, let's just see where everyone's getting paid.
Another user wrote, awesome, bragging about being $30 million a year in debt in a sport and a league that can't afford that debt. Super interesting.
So yeah, I have some thoughts on that, but I think I want to circle back on that after we kind of put a pin in this article.
So I reached out to people I really respect in the industry. I reached out to a paddle manufacturer with a very robust business background outside of paddles. And I said, what do you think about all of this? So meaning the bridge loan that's required by January 15th to keep the business afloat, plus everything that's been going on with paddles and kind of this $100,000 a year mafia fee, not my words. And this paddle manufacturer wrote me back and he said, quote, one word, insolvent. That's the way he's thinking about the UPA. Another paddle manufacturer in the heat of a call last week where Rafa from Gearbox dressed down the UPA's engineering lead so badly that apparently the call had to be stopped abruptly. So this paddle manufacturer wrote me and said, UPA, total clown show. All of this, total clown show.
Yeah, I can't believe we haven't seen a meme that's like, okay, we're opening it up the floor for questions. Also us, okay, we're done with questions.
That's basically what happened. What you just said is literally what happened. People very close to the executive team of UPA have written into me with one kind of recurring theme, which is this is not a well-run organization. And one signed PPA player whom I respect greatly wrote to me and said, this is the definition of a house of cards, which is interesting because that's how the metaphor I've kind of been conceptualizing for the past couple months. So I have a couple things here. Like for people who are like, well, Jill, you just hate the UPA. You just hate the PPA. First off, no, I love MLP. And second off, I have a vested financial interest in the success of UPA. So I exercised a small portion of my shares kind of immediately after the merger, primarily so that I wouldn't be left out from investor notices, which, by the way, I have not received a single shareholder or investor notice. I had to hear about the bridge loan through, circuitous routes. And so, yeah, it's in my financial interest that they do well. I want to see Pro Pickleball do well. So financially, I'm rooting for them. I don't know if morally, candidly, or ethically I am. And I think, what would the UPA say in response to everything we're talking about right now? That's another way I think about it.
Oh man, that's like getting into character. You have to like embody. Okay, let's
what
go
can they
the
say?
thought
They're
process
not
of
going to
how
say
the UPA operates.
they're not going to say
How do we spin this?
Well, here's what they're not going to say. They're not going to say
You're right.
we miscalculated. Yeah, they're not going to say we miscalculated in the merger
they're
and
gonna point
grossly
fingers.
underestimated our costs.
Yeah, they're going to say Steve Kuhn started this and we're cleaning up the mess. And it's like, what? He took a line out of your playbook and was trying to do it in a spirit of the betterment of players' lives.
Yeah.
You're doing it in this betterment, in the spirit of owning everything and having indentured servitude players.
I think they would say, look, we have a short-term financial Q1 cash crunch due to these front-loaded player expenses. We also have this MLP team buyback of $4 million coming due as well.
So to be clear, last year, 2 teams opted out and they had said, okay, anyone who wants out, we'll buy your team for, I thought it was $5 million, turned out to be $4 million. So they paid one of those teams last year, the ATX Pickleballers, and this year the Milwaukee team is getting paid that $4 million that they sold for. And the thought was, oh, well, next year we'll be able to sell those 2 teams plus 4 more. So theoretically, 6 teams could be for sale. So and that could mean, well, if you look at the last known entity, the $10 million that Frisco Panda sold for, there's a quick $60 million.
Yeah. Well, I think valuations have come down considerably because I've talked to team owners who can't sell their team right now for $1, and they've attempted to, and they're trying to.
And this is how you end up at a house of cards, because it's easy to go, oh yeah, we got $60 million coming, easy. Yeah. And there was like a clawing to get teams 2 years ago, and now we're in a very different state of affairs, not to mention the international threat that is keeping the contracts.
That's the kind of a number one question from a lot of the team owners right now is, well, what about this PWR league? What about this global entity? What about these international entities? Because here's the sad and fascinating truth. In a year and a half, the majority of the player contracts are coming up. In fact, I think we knew Ben Johns only signed a 1-year contract, so I'm surprised they haven't already announced his renewal for the next 3 years like they did with Gabe Tardio, made a public announcement about it. But the sad and interesting fact is in a year and a half from now, player contracts are coming up again. So how do we ensure, if you're an MLP team owner being asked to put up more money, right? Like you're being treated like this piggy bank, constantly being come to and asked for money. How do you as a team owner continue to support an organization that in a year and a half might be in the same exact spot it was a year ago, fighting over players, right? All these contracts are coming up.
Right. And we thought a lot of them were going to get let go. We thought and in a year, it'd be like a lot of those 1 years, they'll be glad to be done with to clean up their books. But instead, because of that international threatening, like, oh, do we want to allow someone else to get the strength and, play from these players we have signed? We might as well throw, another few $100,000 at them just to keep them. Because at the point where you're looking for a $12 million bridge loan or whatever, what's another $200,000 for a middling to high player?
And you have these entities, right? Tortoise and the Hare that are just hanging out profitable, the APP, hosting more pros than any other tour in the world. They have pre-qualifiers, okay? So you've got the APP waiting in the wings, just plugging along. You've got UTR, this global huge sports entity run by Mark Leshley. I also have a financial interest in UTR. And I heard they just offered to buy the APP last month. And they're trying really hard to continue to grow their footprint in pickleball. And you have PWR, Saudi Arabian backed financially and by the Times now with this huge media conglomerate. So in 1.5 years, so you're a team owner being asked for money. How do you evaluate putting more money into this ship with more and more competition coming in? And if you already don't think the organization's well run, it's a really interesting position. There's that sunk cost theory, right? Like you've already put so much money into this, and pickleball is exploding, but is pro pickleball viability as a business just too nascent still?
Right.
They're still having to buy. They were all hoping by 2025 that these broadcast companies would be paying them, right?
Was that
the
runway they thought
Yeah.
for 2025? Well, because I was going to say, the easiest comparison is the MLS, because they're one of the newest, seemingly sustainable leagues of soccer in America, taking something that was, of course, already very successful internationally and bringing it to the US, which dominates in the rest of sports, a little different than something that has started in the US. Yeah. But arguably, how long the MLS took to become what they are now, it was definitely over 10 years. And it wasn't until basically Beckham and then Beckham's retirement and the start of his team. So basically it comes down to the question of if you can fulfill your payroll for however many years, you can hold on until you think that David Beckham magic is coming, right?
Well, and I think that's why, you also heard me say when we had Prawn on the podcast, right? Like I kind of hope he doesn't do a deal with them, because all he has to do is wait.
Yeah. But the competition will drive them harder than combining.
Yep. And so just let's put a pin in like, what would the UPA say here? Because I think it's important to share all sides. And I think they'd say, look, this is a short-term Q1 cash crunch. This is just a bridge. But if you really think about that, they've got huge estimates in here for being able to sell teams. And you and I know that market's pretty much considerably dried up. In fact, the two team owners that exited last year, remember the merger was going to fall apart last year, but just a reminder, it came back together when Tom Dundon said, I'll personally backstop team owner investments. I'll buy back your team for $4 million. So Brene Brown and Mark Lazary were like, we're out. We want no part of this. So they're the ones getting that $4 million buyback. So those expenses, or at least the $4 million, are on the books for 2025 now. And then if you're estimating, 10, 12, $20 million in new team owner sales, like I just don't think that's feasible. So, and if you had revenue goals for 30 plus $1 million and you're falling short of that, 10, 12, $13 million, like my question for the team owner was, a $10 million bridge loan? Like, this is a Band-Aid on a bullet hole.
Now, in that same spirit, you look at the numbers of saying, ticket sales surpassed amateur.
No, I think there's a lot of good.
Without saying what those numbers were, right? Like you'd think they could have just thrown out an average or a total or some kind of idea of like, what is that?
I've just done some back of the napkin math.
And then it's like, why wouldn't they? Yeah. Well, if that number is 2 million, then it's like, doesn't look very good. But if that number is 20 million in ticket sales, then you're like, okay, maybe next year if they grow another, what did they say, 40%, then we can start to estimate how many years it's going to take to get to 30 plus million of player costs, let alone the rest. But classic case of selective numbering. So did you have any final thoughts on this House of Cards prediction oracle?
I think that we've already said it. I've already said everything. I think the MLP team owners are going to keep being kind of treated like the piggy bank that they've been treated as. And
hypothetically, if you had a few teams just say, all right, we're walking, I'm just out. Don't pay me $4 million. I'm just done.
Well, they can't get the $4 million anymore.
Right.
They can't. That's off the table.
But if they
now.
just walked, they said, I've spent whatever. $10 million over the last 3 years.
Well, it's the sunk cost syndrome. What do? Walk away from your investment?
And if you walk away because you don't want to continue having to be a piggy bank,
then you're going to have to go find team owners willing to purchase shares of your team who will take on the capital requirements.
Right.
That's on you.
Do you think that would happen?
I don't know. What's the other option for a team owner?
Some of these team owners bought at $100,000.
I think the team owners could do this.
Some team owners bought at $500,000.
So here's what the team owners could do. Okay, I'm glad we're having this conversation because I think this is interesting. If you still believe in Pro Pickleball and you still believe in the businesses, then I think you could ask for a change in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
If the overwhelming, I don't know,
that not happened after asking.
If the overwhelming consensus, which I keep hearing, is this is not a well-run organization, new leadership.
But that's still a very hopeful down the road change. It's not necessarily dollars and cents.
Yeah, but I don't think it's a Band-Aid on a bullet hole.
Right. Here we are. Our slogan, Pickleball is Joy. Our belief in the sport runs very deep. Our reasons for believing in the sport have more to do with the game itself than perhaps
Professional pickleball.
But to me, it goes hand in hand that a sport that is as much fun to watch as pickleball, as its own separate quality, deserves the future, the bright, sunny future of at least golf. I mean, come on. I've watched so much golf in my life. It's so boring. Let's be honest. Baseball. I mean, the reason most people watch sports is not because they like the sport. There's always the edges of the bell curve, right? But the lump in the middle, why do they watch? Why do they care?
I don't know.
It's betting. It's their colors. It's their home team. It's their family.
Yeah.
My family has always been a USC fan or always been a, Dodger fan. And so I'm a Dodger fan, right? So that the beauty of MLP has always been that it's playing into that lane.
That's MLP though. And I think MLP is being treated right now like you're the reason this business is failing. Like it's all on you. Your events are failing. Like it's so redheaded stepchild. And that was what a lot of the team owners were going to be scared. Were scared
right
in the merger of happening. And it's totally happening. It's like just finger pointing at MLP. And I'm like, oh my God, MLP is still like the best format. Like Americans in particular, I mean, they watch team sports. They get behind a team.
Yeah, no, this
And
might
don't
be
shove that into a corner. But I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, and this might be a little bit too much of a non sequitur. You let me know. But what stops other entities like PWR from taking what's great about MLP and just copying and pasting?
I think that's what they're doing.
Of MLP that's actually controllable and copyrightable or whatever. So
I think that's what they're doing.
We'll see.
All right, we're going to move on from this, but let us know what you guys think. We're not trying to start the new year off all doom and gloom. You know, our motto is pickleball is joy. I really do believe that. And we want to keep spreading that. But at the same time, like some stuff needs to be said. And apparently we're the people that do that. The two chicks.
Yes, we're in a very unique Venn diagram, aren't we?
You know what? One of my favorite things your mom said is if you don't want it reported, don't do it.
Yes, it's actually the slogan in my hometown newspaper.
I just want UPA to stop doing it, and I don't have to. I don't want to talk about it. All right, Kristin, let's talk about Paddlegate 5.5. Can we just catch everyone up? I have a challenge for you. 2 minutes.
30-second elevator pitch.
2 minutes on the clock right now. Put it in the corner, Kristin. You're really good at editing on Adobe Premiere. Okay, right here. I'm pointing towards the corner. Okay. Give us like. Kind of a 2 minute recap
in a full what's the word? The
auctioneer
voice.
No. Give us a 2 minute recap from like Paddlegate 1.0 to now.
Right. Yeah. It used to be some random schmoes in Seattle playing with wooden paddles, and then when we entered the sport, our awareness of it was these fiberglass paddles. Then we started seeing the entrance of carbon fiber. And all of a sudden we had the first Paddlegate, and that was Paris Todd beating Annalie Waters in singles in San Clemente, California for the first time, after which she had her paddle challenged.
Giving you 2 minutes on the clock right now.
Is it like 1:40 now?
Yeah.
After which she was challenged, her paddle passed. But then somehow they still banned the carbon paddle based on grit. So that was Gritgate. Fast forward to somehow Pro XR also got lumped in there with the Gritgate.
With Gritgate, yep.
Then we saw the deflection gate. So these paddles started having the core crushing deflection problems. They developed an on-site test and said, we're going to start doing challenges. The first and last person who was ever challenged and failed and punished was none other than Jill's partner, Sarah Ansbury. And after which they said, we need to keep that paddle just for overnight. We promise we'll give it back to you. And of course, they did not. But she's still the only player
destroyed it. The UPA
that has actually been punished. And they put forth the team that had lost to you guys instead. And you guys went to the back draw, and she played with one of my paddles because she was literally out of paddles. Then we go to Tyson, who triple crowns, not Before
At the
which
Tournament of Champions.
Travis Rettenmeier was playing against and challenged during the match and after the match, after which they said, just kidding, you didn't challenge before or after, even though that's literally what happened. They said he hadn't challenged at the right moment in time.
And Tyson's paddles
somehow
failed,
they just
right?
miraculously didn't cause any Tyson.
God, you have 20
punishment.
seconds left.
Fast forward to fall of that year, you playing against the Paddletech paddle, and all of a sudden it's like, what is that? Oh, I guess they finally gave Arena the paddle that Annalie Waters has been blowing everyone out of the water with, even though Paddletech has not changed their technology for like 3 years at the time. So here we are into the alpha era. This is 2024. We're coming back on the 1 year anniversary, and we're done.
2 minutes on the clock, but I think we need to touch on a couple of these things. So
that's the backstory.
So
and then this story really does begin with the alpha.
So go ahead.
Yeah, basically, Yola comes out with a paddle that's like, whoa, what's that paddle? Everyone needs to start wearing eyewear. I don't think you heard much about that until this year. And then the alpha was their prototype. They always name their prototypes alpha, so that's not really the specific, but that came out with its real paddle, which was called the Gen 3. And as most of you know, that got almost immediately banned, not before which Yola themselves said, sorry, we accidentally sent you the wrong paddles. These are the ones we actually are selling right now. And USAP took that opportunity to say, those paddles are all not going to be allowed, even the ones you resubmitted, no, sir. And so they had to roll back to a different paddle that had already been approved for their pro players. Then a few months later, actually a few days later, they sued the USAP for, I think, $30 million, and they're still in the midst of that lawsuit.
More, yeah.
All right, well, we'll put the details of that on the description, but they're still in the midst of that lawsuit.
Of course, the UPAA, the governing body of the UPA is formed in response to what they will call, or what they've said, kind of the severe incompetency, not my words, of USA Pickleball's paddle testing. And they felt like, hey, we need to take this into our own hands. And now, of course, they're saying we've got 7 figures of spending on the research and the design of these testing equipment pieces and the development of the standards and working with ULOL Mass.
Which plays perfectly into their continuous storyline of,
pay us $100,000
we would test better, but we don't have the technology. So now they're going ahead and putting their money where their mouth is.
And you guys need to pay, and manufacturers need to foot the
Except
bill,
they're
which
not
is
putting
a
their
leap
money.
of logic that I don't
Right.
know if I agree or disagree with, to be honest with you.
So obviously there are going to be costs associated with testing and theoretically more intensive testing. Some of these tests take upwards of an hour per paddle, so it's understandable. But the idea that you need to offset the cost of that said testing increase in like 6 months? Like what's the runway for getting that money back?
So
You should
again,
probably have like a 10-year runway.
Is it
in my
fair to
mind.
test? Is it fair to charge the manufacturers with the costs of developing the testing equipment and the standard,
Which,
the standards?
not to
Is that fair? I'm not saying it is or it isn't.
Imagine-
And number two, is this really solving actually for absolutely anything? Hear me out. I talked to one paddle manufacturer who said, this is so funny. We're going to spend all this money and players are still going to be playing totally proprietary, custom-made paddles. You just take the faceplate of the paddle that's for sale at Dick's Sporting Goods or Pickleball Superstore, and you put that on a custom paddle. And since there's no or limited on-site dynamic testing, the UPA and USA Pickleball and APP and all these entities, they can't tell you what that paddle is. If it passes these like very basic deflection tests, right, that's not a PB core test. There's no on-site actual really good testing, like where we want to get to.
Yeah, so part of the way that they're trying to mitigate
it's not
that,
solving the pro problem of what are they really playing. Like,
Right. The part of the mitigation of that in USAP's eyes is they're going to now X-ray paddles. But again, the X-rays are not on site for pro players. And even so, you gotta know someone's gonna figure out how to make an X-ray look like the other paddle while still having slight differences. I mean, we all know that an X-ray doesn't show you a ligament. We need MRIs. So what's next? Are we gonna see MRIs
this
for
is
paddles?
rife. This whole thing is just so rife for cheating.
Yeah. So imagine being a paddle company, and not only that, but you don't have necessarily the same testing equipment to, even if you wanted to be an honorable person, an honorable company, and make paddles according to their specifications, you don't really know what's coming out until you submit your paddles for certification. So you got to tell your Chinese manufacturer to do something different, then rush those paddles back and get them tested. Once you get the feedback back, then you're going to go through this whole thing again. Not to mention mass manufactured, anything is going to have differences in deflection. That's just the way it is. It's the same with golf clubs or baseball bats or anything else. So
I had one person again who's super close to the exec team at UPA, and I wrote them and said, do you believe any of this? And it was in that like raw PR statement you read earlier. And they wrote me back and said, I've stopped reading anything Connor's written. And so why I mention that is because when Connor sent out a letter to all players, which I received, as did all players, which didn't say confidential, about the new paddle testing procedures and standards, he writes, here are the companies that have signed their PPA MLP marketing license: Adidas, Yola, Proton, Pro Kenix, Paddletech, Pro XR, and Versix. And then he supplies a list of contract out or verbal commitment already made for a PPA MLP marketing license: Franklin, Head, Holbrook, 60, Pickle, Selkirk, Vatic, Vulcan, Wilson, Knox, Callaway. And literally 48 hours, a huge group of paddle companies, many of which are in this contract out or verbal commitment column that Connor articulated, the paddle companies get together and they send a letter to Connor and the UPA that says, no, we haven't verbally committed.
Selkirk letter 2.0.
Yeah. Don't tell anyone we verbally committed. That is not true. We still have a million questions. We're asking for essentially an extension.
Yeah.
And
that's classic UPA language. Contract out or verbal commitment. So
classic maneuver.
It's like, I asked the prom queen on a date, so
She
I'm
said
going to put her on the
maybe.
list of maybes.
That's really funny. So there was that whole hoopla, and then basically what it's resulted in is just a ton of back and forth with UPA between the paddle companies and the UPA. And candidly, there's been so many changes, reversals, 180s, talking out of both sides of their mouths. Again, not my words, paddle manufacturers' words, that I frankly don't even know clearly where we stand right now, other than at the Masters next week, I'm not playing a Gamma. I'm playing a Yola S3. And that's because
theoretically,
well, that's
no way to really guarantee anything at this point.
That's because, all these companies who aren't doing this certification fee and this marketing licensing fee, the PPA has now said essentially, okay, that's fine, but you need to produce a paddle for your players that's all black and logoless. And this is like a 12-day heads up going into the Chinese New Year for these manufacturers to be able to scramble. And I wrote one manufacturer, I don't know if I told you this, and just said is it hard for you to build a business when the rules are in this constant state of flux? And he wrote me back and was like, you have no idea, crying face. Because I'm trying to figure out who has a black paddle, and it's nobody does. So you can only do that if you've already submitted that paddle for a interim certification and paid a certain fee. And I think that's going to buy you now 3 to 4 months.
Also, I have to note that this is super ironic on the heels of a last year and a half where almost every paddle already was basically just a black face with a white edge guard.
Yeah.
How did anyone differentiate what they were seeing on a TV screen that's 3 millimeters high on an 80-inch screen, not to mention on your phone where it's 1 millimeter big. You're looking at these paddles and what? You can really tell that that's a Selkirk and that's a Gamma and that's a
I was laughing
Vatic.
so hard. I was laughing
they're all
so
black.
hard. One paddle manufacturer wrote me and said, I'm getting out my Sharpie.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this shit.
Which, by the way,
which is illegal.
Seemingly is not that big a deal.
USAP illegal.
There's a special rule in the rule book that you are allowed to play a paddle that's been autographed. So someone just needs to figure out
how to autograph
their name 800 times tiny and just call that a blackout.
I know what I can do with my Gamma paddle. Hey,
just
my
says Jilly B
autograph
80
is a
times.
big G, and I trace the white Gamma logo on the paddle. Hey, I spell my name with a G.
Of my name.
I've legally changed my name so that I can play my paddle at the Masters. Look, I'm not an attorney, so if you're listening to this and you are, can you let us know if what I'm thinking is along the right lines? I think a lot of this is tortious interference, right? Because you're asking players who have contracts that predate, most likely, or in some instances, their PPA agreements. So they have these existing contracts that say, I will play exclusively, a Gamma paddle, for instance. And now you sign a PPA contract that says,
contracts. One says you can't and one says you can't. And then you're like, well, wait, I can't not both.
One contract says, I'm going to play my Gamma paddle. Now the next contract you sign, that's PPA contract, says I will play a minimum of 22 events a year. So now the Masters comes about. And if Gamma hasn't done the certification and you have this PPA contract, you're now in violation of both of your agreements because you need to play your 22 events, right? So you're putting players in these extraordinarily uncomfortable positions. And when I brought this up to someone at the UPA, they're like, oh, well, it's like a small number of players. But I don't think it is a small number of players.
What even is a small number? If it's 5 players,
it's still
that's
a bad
still
position.
A significant
well,
number
and
of
the other thing that the UPA representative said to me was, well, we're their biggest sponsor. And I don't like that logic either, because that's like saying, oh, well, we pay them more than their paddle company, so they can just go ahead and breach their paddle company deal because you're the bigger sponsor. You're more important. So we can put...
Who's not playing the Masters, right? So far, Hayden and Federico, not on the list. I don't think Will Howells is playing. He's obviously not a fully PPA contracted player, but he's a Franklin player like Hayden. Federico just left Yola. Like, is that absence a reflection on this? Or is it just, I wanted a rest beginning of the year?
Maybe I'm biased because I feel like in all of these decisions made by these executives in a room, it's always the players left holding the bag. That's what I think.
Yeah.
But, I'm always fighting for the players.
Yeah, and a big difference.
Even when I was an executive I was fighting for the players.
Right, right. And we talked about on the pod that we are not publishing the difference between putting pressure on players at the end of the year, to which you are paying money, and who are, largely 20-something kind of
grateful to have
clueless,
anything.
for lack of a better term, abusable entities versus trying to put the squeeze on paddle companies who are experienced, sophisticated businessmen and women
who have attorneys
asking for money, and how very different that pressure is and the reaction that we're seeing. So paddle companies sort of organize a dispute letter, a pseudo boycott of these new quote unquote mafia fees of the UPA. Where are we now? Who's in, who's out? Are we still seeing Selkirk out of the picture?
So they end this letter that's co-authored by 10 companies with, we're committed to working together to support a balanced, independent certification process that aligns with our shared vision for the future of pickleball. In support of this transition, we collectively propose a reprieve of no less than 1 year or longer if needed from certification and the comprehensive broadcast participation and marketing licensing fee. This will provide manufacturers with the ability to be featured on broadcasts, leverage PPA and MLP logos on packaging, and much more in new submissions for paddle use within the PPA MLP tours.
So basically, they just don't want this to happen right away. They're in agreement that there should be better testing. There might be more cost to this testing, but the immediate marketing fee they want pushed out for a year.
Yeah, they say this reprieve period would allow ample time to develop a thorough, transparent, and unbiased certification process, ensuring that these standards are done right the first time. So I think it's kind of implied there, like they don't like what they're hearing right now.
Yeah.
It says such standards are not something that can simply be put together to compete against the long-established status quo since the sport's inception. So the read here is, look, you guys wanted to start your own governing body. You wanted to compete with USA Pickleball, but you're rushing this. And the co-signed companies are Selkirk Head, Engage, Gearbox, Vatic Pro, Holbrook, Reload, Komodo, Gamma, and Babolat.
And then since then...
And there are companies not on there, but who haven't paid the certification, like Carbon, right?
But we've been allegedly told that the pickleball companies submitting a blacked out paddle include Komodo.
So they paid the preliminary certification fee.
So where does that leave Selkirk?
So I've heard Selkirk has signed. They're already spending probably $100,000 a year with the PPA. So what's it to them? I think their big issue, as evidenced by those Selkirk love letters that we published a few months back, was like the engineering side of things, the incompetency of, they specifically named Gary from PPL. So, they're spending, I have to imagine, millions on having professional players. Are they really going to allow those players on the PPA to play a black paddle? Like, no way.
Right. So we will see coming up. January 6th will be the beginning of the Masters. Who shows up with what paddles? So do you want to move on to some personal life stuff, or did you have any other transitions?
I think we should talk about
Transition zone. Ding, ding, ding. If you didn't catch the second to last episode of Breakdown. And then did you do defense last week? Is that
there's been
posted?
there's been some juicy pickleball breakdown episodes lately.
Yeah.
Defense and transition zone.
Definitely check them out.
And I've
From
got
the transition zone queen.
Oh, thank you.
A la Dom Catalano. Just couldn't speak higher of your transition game. So learn from the best.
Love that sound.
That is the sound of energy, baby.
Cheers.
Cheers to 2025. Thank you to Rainstorm for being one of our glorious sponsors.
This podcast would not be possible without Rainstorm, not just because of their support, but also because how else would we have the energy?
Literally. I mean, think of how much we've done this year.
I know.
We probably would have done about 30% less productivity without the Rainstorm.
I don't think that's wrong.
And those of you watching will notice this is a brand new flavor. Just in time for the winter. Tropical. It's summer all year long when you're drinking tropical Rainstorm, right?
It's kind of pineapple-y vibes. It might be a new favorite of mine.
Yeah, it's pineapple and orange. Did you want to talk about the construction in the house?
Sure.
So, as previously stated, we have prepped our house for renting and we have moved to Newport Beach into your mother's house. And the caveat was, of course, we have cats. So we had to dig a cat door somewhere in the house to give them free rein. We decided it'd be easier to go through the wall than the door because the door is like a fire-safe door. But honestly, the wall is also a fire-safe wall. So I get digging in this wall and it is like an inch of plaster plus metal. So hard to dig through this wall that I'm like burning through the tools I'm using, this oscillating tool blade. So I had to leave to go to Aspen. We finally had to hire someone to come and finish the job while I was out of town.
Mike.
That guy comes, he's like burning through blades, borrowing tools. So I felt very
gratified,
vindicated that it was like, this house is built like a brick house.
In short, my dad was a home builder. He built this house, his dream house,
last.
and he built it to withstand the, nuclear pickleball fallout.
Totally. Well, bomb shelter, here we come.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, yeah, then I went and visited my parents in Aspen. They've had an amazing snow year. And I was like, I think I have to come alone. Jill does not want to tempt herself skiing, especially when the snow is so good. And my dad was like, what is she even talking about? I've seen her fall harder on a hard court than she'd ever fall on a pair of skis.
That is
Come
so
on.
Something your dad would say.
She falls more fluffy.
She falls more on the hard court than the snow.
He's very fascinated by your movement. But yeah, I thought that was great. But yes, injuries among us. I did bear witness to an Achilles rupture last week, which was very memorable and scary.
To a doctor, nonetheless, right?
Yeah, I think technically a dentist, but that does qualify as doctor.
Okay, so you were playing.
Yeah.
He tracked down a lob.
No, he was like covering the center and then they pulled it wide. I think they even missed. So it wasn't like he even needed to get to that ball, but he tumbled and I was like, did he just twist an ankle? But he shot me a look over his shoulder and I immediately knew he felt that thing where you think someone hit you.
Oh.
You're
So he
like,
thought
"What
you hit him.
me in the back of my leg?" And I was like, uh-oh.
He thought you like chucked a paddle at him for losing the point.
Like, yeah, that's the only natural conclusion. It was like, frisbee. Ha! So yeah, he was on it. He said that the best thing to do is get it fixed in 48 hours. He literally this was a Saturday, he had surgery scheduled for a Monday.
Good for him.
Yeah, so this pod is dedicated to you, Corey.
Oh, I'll feel better,
Luck with the
Corey.
recovery. I asked if he wanted to learn the ukulele while he was laid up.
He
hasn't taken me up on that offer.
I was talking to Dr. Cynthia yesterday, our chiropractor extraordinaire and MLP doctor. And I said to her, hey, I have a question about Achilles. I was in Florida last year playing at the beginning of the year, and my Achilles was so sore. And I asked the on-site physio, like, hey, like my Achilles feels like it's about to rupture. It's so tight. Like, is there a chance if I go play this finals with Andre Dascu against Gabe Tardio and Georgia Johnson, is there a chance I could rupture my Achilles? And he's like, your Achilles never ruptures when it's sore. You're fine. Talking to Dr. Cynthia yesterday, she's like, that's awful advice. Your Achilles will definitely rupture when it's sore.
That is not an umbrella in the rain whatsoever. But you know what Dr. Vince says is the number one preventative exercise for the Achilles, which becomes more and more prevalent in your 40s and your 50s.
Can I guess? Single leg standing.
Yes, basically calf raises.
Oh, what's up?
Yeah, so get those calf raises before, during, and after.
Okay, but you have to do the calf raises right. Like, I was doing calf raises wrong for 2 months, and Vince was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to give you training.
What you've been doing?
I'm going to give you training wheels, Jill. You have to put the tennis ball between your heels. Now go do your calf raises. And then it starts to hurt, like in the proper place. You start to feel the burn in the proper location.
Okay, well, I'm sure something's better than nothing, but definitely that sounds like a good like insurance that you're stressing the right muscles.
My Achilles tendonitis, which I had in both of my heels, way worse in my left, because everything's worse on my left leg, because I only push off for my left leg and only wear holes in my shoes on my left shoe, but that's neither here nor there.
Does this not have anything to do with the fact that you play the left 80% of the time?
Yeah, and I play the left. So my panacea was the toe pro. Yeah. Was the human locomotion toe pro.
Which is basically a form of
calf raises. Yeah. It was more like toe strengthening.
Yeah, which just points to the same kind of general theme that I feel like keeps coming up.
Get strong.
Well, that's the obvious. That's like get healthy or get better. But the theme is that it's connected. So you have to realize that most injuries happen because of what?
A weakness somewhere in the kinetic chain.
Right. There's a muscle that should be doing a job that isn't. So some other muscle tries to compensate, and that's where injuries happen because you're not balancing the right job with the right part of the body. So that's where
Kristin and I were debating on this podcast whether to summarize, like, you know, your 2024 wrapped, and that's a year on 2024 with
really
every injury I overcame, you know? And it's like
January.
When I look back and I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of stuff. But I really think it's just a day in the life of like being a pro athlete. Like something hurts every morning. You got to go strengthen it's totally like whack-a-mole. But hey, I never missed an event from an injury. Like
that's
knock
true.
on wood. Way to start off 2025 with a huge jinx. Let's go.
Yeah.
Hey. Notice our new friend on our podcast studio?
Oh,
that's right.
For those of you listening, I just fluffed up the snow globe from Gamma. I mean, that's a cute little snowman.
That's a cutie pie.
And he's holding a little pickleball paddle with a snowflake on it.
That is darling.
Matches their little snowflake-themed paddle erasers.
Well, we are a little away from Christmas, guys, but no reason you can't prepare 11 months and 25 days in advance for next year. You can still use my code JillyB25 for 25% off all things Gamma. So, Kristin,
I was going to talk about your life-changing lessons, but is this pod too long?
No, I think yeah.
Honestly, I think we should make a corresponding video for this as well.
Okay.
I think this could be 2024 was kind of the year of Instagram, and we're going to make 2025 the year of YouTube.
Yes.
And we're saying it right here, and that means it's true. So, number one, Jilly B life-changing lesson for Kdubby was brush the ball. And I think the best thing that I ever took away was that if you just place your paddle on the net and then get your paddle over the net, that motion of paddle down, pressure in the wrist, angle in the wrist, and over the net for beginners is life-changing. And if you are like me and you came from golf or non-racket sports, that's really important. If you came from another racket sport, you probably don't need that lesson. But number two was defense. And a big part of that is just backing up and stopping your motion, right? Like if you're past halfway back in the reverse transition and you put that paddle down pretty much until 2024, no, even now with the faster paddles, if you're in a decent position, no matter how hard they hit the ball, you can get a paddle on it. If you're ready and you're stable, just paddle down and you will get things back. Now, depending on how hot your paddle is, sometimes you get it back and it's still too far, out, right? But the more you start getting that confidence and like, I don't care how hard they can hit it, I can get a paddle on it.
Yeah,
I think
the
attitude is as important as my point, as the positioning.
Yep, I agree.
Number 3, throw it up. Like when you're on the backcourt and you can't get a ball back in and you're trying to be too perfect, do not waste balls trying to hit perfect thirds into the net. Just throw it up and make them hit another overhead, another lob, back them up.
One more ball.
Just keep going, frustrate the heck out of them, and you'll be surprised how often the 2 players at the net actually lose those points out of sheer overhitting, overswinging, and frustration. And I can't tell you how many pickleball points you see won that way.
Yeah.
And that was revelatory the first time I started noticing that. And then I was like, oh, wow, I do see pros doing this a lot. Wow, that's like a huge part of the game. Again, like that early beginner intermediate phase. The next number 4 is a big part of our theme this year at Trace Palapus. And that is Toes goes. Yes.
These are all connected, by the way. All your themes are super connected.
Right.
And the toes
Absolutely.
is the toes, and the weight forward is the connector in all of it.
I think a lot of this comes from when people go, I'm going to practice third shot drops, which they stand at the baseline and they just go, bloop, let me bloop one and see if I can get it to bounce. Bloop, and
it's
let
the
me see
worst.
if I can
That's
get
the
it to
worst
bounce.
drill. If you want to practice your third shot drops, please don't do that.
Right. What's more realistic is a version of the accordion drill or 7-11, as we talked about, something where there's actually a goal to get to the line.
Yeah, got to get forward.
And when your brain is like, okay, what is the mission of my third shot drop or my fifth shot drop? Of course, any of my drop shots is to produce a ball that gets me there.
Yep.
So that means toes goes, leaning forward mass into the ball, and that completely changes the dynamic of how your trajectory of the ball lands into the opponent's side of the court, and it doesn't necessarily have to bounce.
Yep.
It's best on oftentimes when it's almost like, was that a drive? Was that a drop? Was it a drip? And again, a lot of it is the attitude of like, yeah, this shot is getting me in and let's trust it. Of course, there's a time and a place for realizing, oh, that's not a good one. Back up. Let's defend one. But if your general attitude, just like I always say about like 12-foot putts, is like it's in the hole until it's not, right? It's a perfect shot until proven otherwise. Yeah. That's the attitude. So big in reminding myself, toes goes. The packing tape. We did a video on this 2 weeks ago.
That went viral.
And it was super, super fun.
I wrapped Kristin up for Christmas in packing tape.
Packing tape went around my elbows so that I couldn't reach.
Yep.
And I had to actually move my feet and keep my posture, learning how to regulate what my spine is doing instead of tipping the teapot. And it's just proof that training aids can be great.
Absolutely.
And they don't
or
all
even
have
just
to
visuals.
cost $30. This is $2.99. Let's go. So that kind of goes with just the general thing that you've harped on me for literally eternity. And it is one of those things you never really arrive at, but that's footwork.
Yeah.
And just the general concept of move and stop. You have to be stable when you hit the ball.
And it's not tennis.
Moving early.
It's not tennis. Everyone can have good footwork in pickleball. I don't care how old you are, what your body type is.
True. And I think
it's a very small court to cover. And Scott Crandall, my coach, talks a lot about that in our episode on defense, which is you can get back so much more than you think because it's not a tennis court.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's better to have the attitude of like footwork first and just let my ball and my results speak for themselves than I'm going to try and spazzy, reach out and
the paddle's
hit
really a
balls that
crutch. Like the first thing I do to help people with footwork is I take their paddle away. I take their paddle away and I throw them a ball and they have to go catch it by moving their feet.
Totally.
The paddle's gone.
So that was number 5, packing tape. Number 6 is kind of sad that it took me this long to arrive at this one, but throw the paddle.
Well, can I preface this? Kristin
Yes.
is not known as like the hardest hitter. You guys?
Definitely not. Yeah, people are
And-
like, oh, you probably look athletic. You played a pro sport. You're a golfer. You probably hit the crap out of the ball.
Yeah, she does not.
True at all.
She does not. And it's always been this mystery about why not, because you'll notice like she's got muscle. She has definition that she doesn't even have to like work towards or try for. And here I am in the gym all day long and it's like little, little bird arms. And here she is just looking ripped. But yeah, she struggles to put the ball away. And I've always known it's been from too much arm and not enough hand and wrist, right? Because if you look at like the hardest hitters on the tour, it's like a 2-inch punch. It's a really small move they're making. Their power creation is extraordinarily efficient. So how did we end up coming to the notion of just throw the paddle at it? Did I say that to you? Because I've never taught that way before with that phrase. Or I think I said throw your hand at it.
I think we were at Palm Valley and we were talking about grip pressure or something and the noodle arm. And I was like, yeah, I should be doing that. I think it was like connecting to something else you were thinking about. And I'm like, I'm going to hit some shots like that. And you're like, whoa, that is different.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I feel like I sort of tried to do this 3 years ago, but I wasn't ready yet, because there is obviously some element of new things are going to create inconsistency and you don't want to start trying to hit too hard in games and then you're missing, 6 inches long.
You're definitely hitting it harder than I've ever seen you hit it.
Yeah.
And what I like is the paddle's returning to the perfect spot every time. So tell us what that feels like, throwing the paddle.
Yeah. So for me, it always comes back in golf to like using your torso, your upper center, your chest, and your shoulder motion to cause a motion in your arm and your club. So I always think of like the bored kid in the post office hanging out with mom and he's flopping his arms back and forth.
That's
it's
a good
like,
analogy.
what are you doing? You're barely moving your body, but you're using your body. So just because you're using your body doesn't mean your body's moving a lot. You're causing that reaction out on the end of the stick.
Yeah.
And so it's taking the tension out and it's really sensing the tip of the paddle, which is why there's usually this correlation between if I put more lead tape on the end of my paddle,
which is
I
where
have
I
more
like
power,
it. Yeah.
but it's a little
it.
slower to maneuver. So you're always trying to find that balance between how much weight you have and how easy it is to move. So that's throw the paddle. And I think it works best for kind of the mid-height sitters when you're at the net. Not necessarily yet for overheads, but I think the science is the same. And for serving too. I think there's a lot of aspect of that. Throw the paddle at it. And as a result, I've done it a few times where I do miss long. But just like I tell people, sometimes I'll fix their efficiency in putting and all their putts will start going long. And I'm like, yeah, but think about that. If we took that much efficiency and put it in your driver would be going 20 yards longer. It'd be a good thing. Now with great power, we just don't have to work so hard.
Yep.
So the last one, number 7, is the mini Ernie / catch it in the air, which is kind of an homage back to the footwork thing. It's that one of the hardest shots in the beginning, I think, of playing the left is when someone hits a cross-court dink from their left to your left foot. And it's so easy for that ball to get behind you. And so to reframe it as, hey, if I keep running around it far enough, it's actually an Ernie, and I can just be in that position and just hit it as a forehand. Or just the idea that it's way easier to hit it in the air than to let it bounce, back my foot up, try and make space, and then squeeze something back over the net. So again, the lesson is catch it in the air. And a lot of times this would happen when we were playing together and live in action. Someone would hit that shot and you'd be like, in the air, in the air, in the air. And I think at some point you get that instinct for like, no, I want to make space, or I want to see if it's out. Is it in? Is it going to land? And it's just like, no.
You've been earning all day. I love it.
I know, it's actually
I'm
sad
so proud of you.
I can basically only Ernie on the left, but I almost always play the right.
I love it.
So I need to work on my right side Ernie. My right side Ernie is just a fake Ernie that gets the opponent to hit the ball back to my partner. So that was it. Jilly's life-changing lessons.
Kristin, what's this hot pink pro band?
I know. It's so great that for that month of October, they decided to go pink for that fuchsia-colored pro band. lets you stand out from the pack.
And a portion of proceeds going to cancer research.
Amazing. Amazing. Not to mention you feel good and you play good. You play good when you feel good. So it's a win-win.
All 2025, I will be wearing my hot pink Pro Band arm bandit. There's also an ankle bandit, a Need It. You can use code Jilly B for 10% off.
And magnetized. Don't forget that option. But yeah, who doesn't know someone who's had a bout of pickleball elbow? Get your Pro Band and get it fixed.
Kristin, hit us up with some year-end pickleball stats, because I'm pretty bullish on pickleball, at least from the recreational and amateur level after reading these stats.
Oh, it's funny that you should mention this because it's like kind of the most obvious post ever. And there's almost nothing to like really be shocked by. It's
Really?
just to me,
I'm
like,
interested.
Pickleball is it. And the SFIA, as we know, the Sports and Fitness Institute of America, has done these great year-end reports on sports beyond pickleball, but of course including. And this year was no different. Their year-over-year growth was 111%. The highest participation is the South Atlantic region, which is, as you'd guess,
Florida?
Basically Florida, a little bit of Georgia. The participation is 59% male, which is really to say like close to 50-50.
Wow,
I traditionally most sports skew very male, so for it to only be 59 is not very much.
I thought it was way closer to 50-50, and tennis is close to 50-50, I think like 52-48. So I was actually surprised to see the 59% male, 41% female breakdown of pickleball.
If you look at the brackets for pro pickleball, it is the same, right? The women's brackets are smaller. The mixed is the most popular and men's is a little bit bigger. So I think that pretty much tracks.
So average age, 46. Wow, that's gotten younger every report.
Yeah, seriously, there are more and more 20-year-olds. In fact, the 70 and 80-year-olds I play with sometimes are complaining about how many 20-year-olds they have to play with now. So it's a real flip of the script.
Wow, can we touch on facility increase? 2,962 courts have been added, up 25% from 2023. That's
It's
great
really
because
hard.
in 2023, it was like, don't quote me on this, it was like 3,000 players per court. Like it was something absurd. And now it's like,
That like supply and demand is really going to start hitting its stride here with this many courts.
Yes.
The problem, of course, is it's always the reverse. It's like Utah got you covered. New York City, struggle bus, right?
South Florida's a struggle.
It's rent, it's land. So the beauty of pickleball over tennis is it does take way less land and you can cram more people on the court. So that definitely helps. And I think in a lot of places it's more indoor conversions using basketball courts and badminton courts in other places in the world. So that's nice that the badminton court is so close that you can convert those easily.
So total number of courts, 63,899. Let's go. I want to see that comparison to tennis. So we'll go look that up.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, officially it is 36% indoor. Only 5% is both. That actually kind of surprises me that there aren't more converting courts there. But yeah, pretty great. Keep going, Pickle. Keep it rocking.
So Kristin, can we talk about our 2025 players to watch and grade us on how we did in 2024?
I think we should talk about how we did in 2024.
Okay.
And then tease it for next week.
Okay. So
next week
we'll
talk
how
about
did
our
we do?
predictions.
How did we do in 2024?
Or is it going to be too little too late? Because by the time the next pod comes out, these things will already be coming true.
No. I like it. We're going to tease 2025 players to watch, but tell us how we did in 2024.
So 2024, you had Georgia Johnson, which in fairness, at the time I was like, Jill, you can't pick Georgia Johnson. Like that's happened. That's not like a secret. Georgia is the next thing, but she definitely did rise to a next level. So I will give you credit for
Lots
that,
of medals.
but less of a dark horse, more of a bright spot there. Christine Maddox, we saw her win her first gold medal just a few months ago. Cass Hogue had some splashes, some upsets for sure. Caitlin Christian
Just
obviously
one
made
gold
her
last
mark.
week.
The one kind of middling didn't necessarily come to fruition yet anyway is Allie Phillips. We had her on the list. So
And then on the
see what
men's
happens
side, we had Augie Ga. We had Jaume Martinez Vic. Gabe Tardio. How did we do on that one?
Yeah.
CJ Klinger, how did we do there? Hayden, Will Sobek, and Jack Monroe. Will and Jack have done really well this year on the APP Tour, especially Will towards the end of the year, getting a second place in nationals.
Yeah. Kind of interesting that the only person on that list that you didn't play with is Will Sobek and Hayden Patriquin.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Augie, you actually still haven't. Oh no, but technically you played with Augie.
Oh, I did.
At the Bay Area Breakers exhibition, but I don't know if we count that. But you were scheduled to play with him, and then they canceled an event and rescheduled, and some weird scheduling conflicts happened. So that's TBD. But
it's a good list.
It's a good list.
All right. So if betting enters the sport, you're definitely going to want to listen to our next podcast because we're going to tell you the 2025 players to watch. And our track record has been okay so far, you guys.
Let's go. I'm excited.
Oh my gosh. You guys, it's end of the year, which means...
Or is it the beginning of the year? It's both.
Basically means I cleaned out my pickleball bag. And
we're giving away your old socks. And a banana peel.
No, we are giving away old gamer paddles. They're not that old because I do switch out my paddles frequently. I sign them. I sometimes write down if I want a medal or two with them. And we ship them directly with love from Newport Beach. So if you're interested in winning this Gamma giveaway contest, all you have to do is comment, "I want it," on YouTube. And we will randomly select 5 winners.
And those 5 paddles will also include a bag of grips.
Okay. Fun fact, we moved into my mom's house in Newport Beach, and she's got this humongous living room that isn't even used like once a year, like maybe once a decade.
This is good.
And so I've just converted a quarter of it to what I call my paddle studio, where you've got like all my paddles, my Hesicor grips, my Gamma grips.
I'm out of town. Jill's explaining this whole thing to me. She's like, my mom never even goes in here. She's not going to notice. While I'm on the phone with Jill, I hear your mom in the background going, "What are you doing in there? Stop it. It's gross. It's messy. Why are you here? No."
Okay, well, paddle studio, rest in peace.
It's a good 30-minute paddle studio.
Oh, man. So in the past couple of weeks, we've seen some big international events. There was one in Vietnam, and my partner, Megan Fudge, was there, and we FaceTime audioed while she was there, and she was like, "Jill, this is nuts. They treat us like a real sport. The matches are going on at 3 p.m. There's not even standing space for spectators. The VIP is totally sold out. There's pickleball on seemingly every rooftop. The amateur matches are packed. Quang Duong was there doing national interviews, getting paid like $5,000 per national interview, supposedly, which is awesome for him. And there's just this feeling there that it's just only the beginning." She writes in her blog, "The opening ceremony set the tone for an unforgettable experience featuring cheerleaders, player tunnels, MCs, and sold-out VIP sections, and incredible turnout despite rain. The passion for pickleball here in Vietnam is palpable, and it's inspiring to see how much excitement surrounds the sport." Interesting fact, Kristin, do you know what the marquee event is there? Like if you have mixed doubles, gender doubles, and singles? Singles.
Yeah. I believe it. I mean, especially if people are introduced to the sport as a spectator first and a participant second, I could see that happening.
So you can subscribe to Megan's blog. You can also subscribe to my blog, you guys. I'm blogging every single Monday, 60 seconds, the Monday Minute, with all the cool things I'm like thinking about, tinkering, learning about, putting in my practice.
Basically just like getting inside Jill's brain for 60 seconds.
It's a scary place. Run. Don't subscribe. Run. Don't do it.
So with that, 2024 is a wrap. And you guys, don't forget,
pickleball is joy.
Don't let anyone tell you differently.
We out.
This pickleball life.